Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, after encountering assassins once, he slipped and fell from a cliff. Because of the severe injuries, he lost his memory. Later, he was saved by a village girl who lived by the river, who brought him home and nursed him back to health. He knelt before the great hall for 3 whole days, swearing that he must break off his engagement with me so that he could be with that girl. The emperor did not know what to do, and could only summon me to the palace to ask about it. I knelt properly in the center of the great hall, trying my best to keep the tears from falling. Your Majesty may let the Crown Prince decide. My wedding with the Crown Prince was approaching. Every day, the nanny kept me in my room, making me embroider my wedding robe. Even pausing for a moment to watch the sparrows flying across the sky would earn me half a day of scolding. Miss, what is there to watch about sparrows? The phoenix in your hands is the truly precious one. The wedding robe in my hands was already more than halfway finished. Upon it was embroidered a magnificent phoenix, vivid and lifelike. For more than half a year, I had worked on it day after day. At last, the results were almost ready to be seen. The wedding robe was exquisite and flawless. Just like myself, I was the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family. My father was the prime minister of the court. And my grandfather had once served as the imperial tutor of the previous dynasty. For generations, our family had held great power and high rank. Naturally, Jiang Huayue had become the most noble young lady in the entire capital. Because of this, my parents raised me with extremely strict discipline. Music, chess, calligraphy, painting, every skill had to be mastered. My father had even invited a palace nanny to teach me. She was indeed very strict, and loved meddling in every little matter. But once I became the crown princess, she would no longer have the chance to control me. At that time, I would raise an entire nest of sparrows in the Eastern Palace. Whenever I thought of His Highness the Crown Prince, the days spent circling endlessly in my room, embroidering the wedding robe, no longer felt so difficult. Crown Prince Rong, you had grown up with me since childhood. His name, meaning benevolence and magnanimity, was known by everyone in the capital. As the only legitimate son of the emperor, Rongyu had been appointed crown prince from a young age and raised according to the standards of a future sovereign. Etiquette, music, painting, archery, horse riding. There was nothing he did not excel at. His temperament was kind and virtuous, deeply loved by both the court officials and the common people. He was a perfect crown prince, without the slightest flaw. And I was also the perfect crown princess in everyone's eyes. News of our engagement had spread throughout the lands under heaven. There was no one who had not heard of it, but who could have imagined that this admired union of a talented man and a beautiful woman would suddenly break apart halfway through? On the day I finished embroidering the wedding robe, the nanny rushed in with panic written all over her face. During the crown prince's journey outside the capital, where he had gone to inspect the regions and seek solutions for flood control, he had encountered assassins. He had unfortunately fallen into a deep ravine, and his life or death was still unknown. My hands turned so cold they began to tremble. The embroidery needle pierced my fingertip, and a sharp pain spread through it. A drop of blood accidentally fell onto the phoenix's wing. The situation was urgent. I had no mind to pay attention to anything else. I hurried to find my father to ask what had happened. My father comforted me, saying that the cliff was not very high, and that the emperor had already sent people to search for him. For several days, I could not sleep peacefully. From morning until night, I chanted Buddhist scriptures, praying that the crown prince would return safely. Perhaps my prayers had reached the Buddha. 1 month later, the crown prince was finally brought back. I heard that he had been gravely injured. I was overjoyed. Without even changing into my usual magnificent and elaborate clothes, I hurriedly arranged to enter the palace. As a frequent visitor to the Eastern Palace, I even possessed a token that allowed me to enter freely. But today something felt wrong. After arriving in front of the Crown Prince's palace hall, I was suddenly stopped by someone. Li He, a guard of the Eastern Palace, said awkwardly to me, "Miss Jiang. The smell of blood inside is very strong. It would be better if you did not go in." He had always been an honest and straightforward man. After finishing his sentence, he looked so embarrassed that he did not even dare to meet my eyes, as if he had just done something that weighed heavily on his conscience. I felt that something was strange, so I spoke to him seriously. "Lord Li, I am the Crown Prince's fiancé. Now that His Highness is gravely injured, how could I possibly ignore it? I am not afraid of blood. Please allow me to enter." Li He probably could not think of another reason to stop me, so he reluctantly stepped aside. A sense of unease rose in my heart, but outwardly I forced myself to remain calm as I walked inside. The moment the palace doors opened, I saw a delicate and beautiful young woman holding a bowl of medicine, feeding the Crown Prince spoonful by spoonful. I froze in place. The girl had her back to me and did not notice my presence, but the Crown Prince did. He lifted his head and looked toward me, his eyes filled with unfamiliarity and caution. "Who are you? How dare you intrude into the Eastern Palace?" Why did he ask me that? Could it be that he no longer remembered me? My heart fell into complete panic, yet I still tried to maintain the composure of a noble young lady. Softly, I replied, "Crown Prince brother, I am your fiancée, the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family." "Jiang Huayue?" His face suddenly turned pale. Without even looking at me, he quickly turned to explain to the young woman beside him, I don't know her. I don't like her either. Don't misunderstand." He asked who I was, yet called the girl beside him Aner. Just hearing those words made the difference between us painfully clear. The young woman turned to look at me, and only then did I clearly see her face. She had almond-shaped eyes and peach blossom lips. Her gaze pure and bright, like that of a child who had never once been drawn into the struggles between great families. When she saw me, her expression darkened slightly. In a soft voice, she said, "So, you already had a fiancé before?" She paused, then continued awkwardly, "In that case, perhaps I should step aside for a moment." She placed the half-finished bowl of medicine into my hands and was about to leave when the Crown Prince suddenly stopped her. He snatched the bowl from my hands and drank the remaining medicine in one gulp. Then he smiled gently and comforted the young woman. But when his gaze turned toward me, his eyes became completely expressionless. Since childhood, the Crown Prince had always been gentle in temperament and respectful of etiquette. Even when he spoke heartless words, he still maintained that composed demeanor. "Miss Jiang, I unfortunately met with disaster and have now lost my memory. At the moment of life and death, it was Aner who saved me. She and I share mutual affection, therefore Aner is the only fiancé I acknowledge." He spoke each word slowly and clearly. As for the engagement between us, I only just learned about it myself. In the end, it all belongs to the past, and I remember none of it. Let us not mention this engagement again. He had lost his memory. He no longer remembered me. How could something like this happen? In a daze, I excused myself and left. As I walked out, my body staggered slightly. I went to find Li He to ask about the entire situation. Li He had been one of the people sent to search for the Crown Prince. If anyone knew what the Crown Prince had experienced, it would be him. Seeing my serious expression, Li He did not dare to hide anything further. He told me everything that had happened. The crown prince had fallen into deep water at the bottom of the cliff and was carried downstream by the river current. That area happened to be near the home of a physician. The physician's daughter had been gathering herbs in the forest when she discovered the crown prince. She brought him home and treated his injuries while taking care of him. Because she had been born during the peak bloom of the peach blossoms, she was named Jiang. The crown prince had lost his memory, and Jiang had become the one who saved his life. Under such circumstances, it was only natural that he would develop feelings for her. When the palace search party finally found the crown prince, he insisted on bringing the girl back to the capital with him. He even demanded that she personally feed him his medicine. After hearing everything, my heart gradually turned cold. I returned to the Jiang residence in a daze. A few days later, the news that the crown prince had brought a common village girl into the palace spread everywhere. Not long after that, the crown prince knelt before the emperor's hall, pleading to cancel his engagement with me. The rumor that the crown prince had fallen in love with a common girl and wanted to dissolve his engagement with the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family quickly became the main topic of gossip throughout the capital. The women of the Jiang household did not dare to step outside anymore, afraid of the whispers and ridicule of others. As for me, I did not know what to do. I shut myself inside my room, depressed and listless. My mother entered carrying a bowl of red bean and lotus seed soup, speaking with worry. "Huayue, you've been skipping meals for days. Eat something to ease your hunger." I shook my head. "Mother, I'm not hungry." After hesitating for a moment, I still could not help asking, "Is the crown prince still kneeling there?" It has already been 3 days. Today it's even raining. The wounds on his body haven't healed yet. How could he endure it? My mother did not want to answer directly and could only change the subject. But I knew he was still kneeling there. He wanted to force the emperor to compromise. I took the bowl of soup from my mother and drank a mouthful just to appease her. The soup was very sweet, yet my heart felt unbearably bitter. I forced myself to swallow a few more mouthfuls so that my mother would not worry. Then I set the bowl down on the table. Finally making up my mind, I said, "I want to go to the palace." My mother did not stop me. When I arrived outside the emperor's hall, I saw from afar that the crown prince was still kneeling in the rain. His long robe was soaked through, and he no longer possessed the graceful elegance he once had. I walked closer and raised my umbrella to shield him. Rarely had I ever been able to look down at him like this. He still had the same handsome features, deep eyes, a high nose, strikingly handsome as ever. And yet now he felt strangely unfamiliar. His face had turned pale from the cold. "So stubborn," I murmured. "Your health is already so weak, yet you still refuse to consider your own limits." He noticed me, but did not look in my direction. His gaze remained fixed straight ahead as he spoke coldly. "Miss Jiang, there is no need to do this." I remained standing there. He immediately moved away from beneath my umbrella until he was once again drenched in the rain. The way he avoided me as if I were some evil spirit made me feel a little uncomfortable. The crown prince of the past had once said he would marry only me, that in this life and the next, there would only ever be me. And yet now he ignored his own injured body, kneeling before the hall for so long, just to sever all ties with me, so that he could marry another woman he loved. Suppressing the pain in my heart, I spoke carefully. "With a faint trace of hope, I can take a step back and allow her to become a secondary consort. Would you stop kneeling then?" With Ying's background, even becoming a secondary consort would already be considered climbing far above her station. His gaze was cold and indifferent. Without the slightest hesitation, he replied, "She is the woman I love. She cannot be a concubine. I will only love the person I choose in this lifetime and the next. In this life and the next, there will be only one." Suddenly, I wanted to laugh, yet the bridge of my nose stung, as if tears were about to fall. Jiang Huayue. How ridiculous, and how pitiful. I lifted my head and looked up at the drifting rain. Dark clouds blanketed the entire sky. I stood there for a long time, until my emotions finally calmed. A close guard of the emperor hurried over and invited me inside. The emperor had probably already expected that I would come. His face was full of sorrow and disappointment. As if he hated the fact that iron could not be forged into steel. In front of me, the emperor severely reprimanded the crown prince, scolding him for always valuing the greater good in the past, yet now becoming so foolish as to be bewitched by a mere common girl. In the end, the emperor turned and asked for my opinion. My opinion. If I insisted on marrying the crown prince, I would only be putting the emperor in a difficult position. Why should I cling so stubbornly? But if I agreed to break off the engagement, then this matter would surely become the laughingstock of the entire realm. From then on, the Jiang family might never again find a marriage alliance of equal status. The man who once did everything he could to make me laugh whenever he saw me frowning in sadness. Now he was determined to push me into a situation where there was no way forward or backward. At that moment, I finally understood. The crown prince of today no longer loved me. I bowed to the emperor, then knelt in the middle of the great hall and spoke solemnly, each word clear and steady. I will abide by whatever decision His Highness the Crown Prince makes. I swallowed my tears. As the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, no matter the circumstances, I could not lose my composure. Shedding tears would be improper. It would be weakness. It was not the bearing of a noble family. The emperor then issued an imperial decree, dissolving the engagement between the crown prince and me. But that was all. The emperor did not agree to allow Jiang to become the crown princess. After all, whether in family background or virtue and talent, Jiang simply did not qualify for that position. Miss, please don't be sad. My maid tried to comfort me. His Highness the Crown Prince has only been bewitched by a fox spirit for the moment. I heard that the Imperial Medical Bureau has already sent a letter to his master, inviting the old imperial physician to return to the capital to examine the Crown Prince. If that old physician personally treats him, the Crown Prince will surely recover soon. Miss, no one in the world is more suitable for the Crown Prince than you. The Crown Princess will become the future Empress. It isn't a position that can simply be granted because someone likes it. When the Crown Prince calms down, he will surely come to his senses. Please don't worry, Mississippi. At most, that common girl will only become a minor concubine. Ah, miss. Please don't cut that. This is the wedding robe you spent an entire year embroidering. The nanny hurriedly snatched the wedding robe from my hands and refused to let me touch it. This is something meant for the crown princess, I said quietly. I no longer need it. What use is there in keeping it? But the nanny ignored my words. She carefully folded the robe like a precious treasure. She still held hope for this marriage. In truth, not only she, but my parents, the emperor, and even the queen, all still held hope. They believed that one day the crown prince would surely change his mind. After all, the many years of affection between Rong-yu and me, how could it simply vanish overnight? But they did not know that even if Rong-yu truly changed his mind, I would not. I set down the scissors in my hand and pressed my palm against my chest. My heart throbbed with waves of pain, yet my mind felt strangely clear. Rong-yu and I could never return to how things once were. Even if one day he regained his memory, spilled water could never be gathered again. Between us, a wall had already formed. No matter what we did, we could never cross it. Since childhood, I had always pursued perfection. I did not like things that were no longer as perfect as they once were. For example, that phoenix wing stained with blood, or the crown prince he had become now. A few days later, Li He arrived at the Prime Minister's residence with a group of men. Behind them were countless chests and boxes. When he saw me, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Miss Jiang." His Highness the Crown Prince said that since the two of you have now gone separate ways, the Eastern Palace will not keep the items you previously sent. Otherwise, Miss Chu might feel unhappy if she sees them. Ever since the engagement was arranged, my mother had instructed me to personally sew sachets and garments to send to the Eastern Palace from time to time, showing the diligence and thoughtfulness of the Jiang family's daughter. Over the years, quite a great many items had been sent there. I looked at the piles of chests and boxes stacked before the gate, then I gave a bitter smile. His Highness the Crown Prince is truly considerate. Li He scratched his head, not knowing how to respond. As I looked at the objects before me, many memories from the past suddenly resurfaced. When I turned 1 year old, during the ceremony where I was allowed to choose objects symbolizing my future, I crawled across a table filled with precious items. I bumped into this and knocked over that, kicking aside countless pieces of jade and jewels. I crawled from one end of the table to the other, and in the end, I hugged Rongyu, who was 6 years old at the time. The elders present were all amused by the scene. They joked that I truly knew how to choose, that I had selected the most precious thing there. From that moment on, the bond between Rongyu and me began, without exaggeration. Most of the memories from the first half of my life contained his presence. Perhaps seeing me standing there lost in thought, Li He spoke up carefully, "Miss Jiang." I snapped back to reality. My gaze swept slowly across the items before me. After a moment of silence, I finally spoke. "Since we have gone our separate ways, then please trouble the Crown Prince to come here personally. Only then would it be considered sufficiently formal. Lord Li, you should return." I turned and walked inside, not giving Li He any chance to say another word. Bao Zhu, the maid who served at my side, was fuming with anger. "Miss, why did you let them take those things back? We could sell them to others, or even give them to beggars. Anything would be better than letting them take them away." I shook my head. Most of those items bear the marks of the imperial household. Ordinary people cannot use them. A few days later, someone once again came to the Jiang residence. The Crown Prince stood outside with a cold expression. Behind him were Li He and a group of men, carrying the same chests and boxes from the other day. He looked at me. "I have personally come here. Miss Jiang, are you satisfied now?" The Crown Prince stood outside the gate. His tall figure was bathed in sunlight, shining upon his white silver robe, yet it could not dispel the chill that seemed to emanate from his entire being. I straightened my clothing and bowed. "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince." Then, instead of letting Li He bring the items inside, I turned to Bao Zhu. She immediately understood and hurried forward with a book in her hands. I looked at the Crown Prince. "The Jiang residence also has many items that Your Highness previously sent here. I have already had them gathered and recorded. Your Highness may conveniently take them back as well." As soon as I finished speaking, the large gates behind me slowly opened. Inside, rows of chests and boxes of various sizes were neatly arranged. While Li He and the others stared in astonishment, I took the ledger from Bao Zhu and handed it to the Crown Prince. Only then did the Crown Prince finally look at me seriously, but he did not take it. "I do not need these things. Miss Jiang may deal with them as she pleases." I did not force him. I handed the ledger back to Bao Zhu, then slowly spoke. "In truth, I do not need Your Highness to return these items either. Why don't we simply find a place and throw them all away?" I gave a gentle smile. "Throw them into the Yun River." What does your highness think? The crown prince's gaze flickered slightly. Perhaps he understood what I intended to do. But he did not object. The carriage of the Jiang resident slowly arrived. I gestured politely toward him. Your highness, please ride with me for this journey. He said nothing, only stepped into the carriage. After sitting down, he turned his gaze toward the window. I sat in a corner some distance away from him, lifting the curtain to watch the lively streets outside. Someone recognized the carriage of the Prime Minister's residence. Gradually, more and more people turned to look, whispering and pointing. Look, that's the carriage of the Jiang family. The Jiang family, the one whose daughter was once considered the future crown princess. But now she's been rejected by the groom's side. The engagement's been broken. The murmurs and gossip drifted into the carriage. I lowered the curtain and looked down at the hem of my skirt. The crown prince had also heard those words. He turned to look at me, his voice carrying a trace of apology. I didn't know they were spreading such rumors. Another day I will send someone to. I raised my head and looked at him. It's all right. After that sentence, neither of us spoke again. The carriage remained silent for the rest of the journey. When we finally arrived and I stepped down, I felt as though I could breathe much more easily. Before us stood a towering cliff, covered in lush green grass. Looking down from above, the waters of the Yun River flowed endlessly below. This was the upper reaches of the Yun River. It was also the very place where Ronyu had fallen. The wind atop the cliff was strong. I stared into the crown prince's eyes. Only now did I realize that he possessed peach blossom eyes. Eyes that should have been full of affection. Yet on his face, those passionate eyes seemed strangely deep and cold. Those eyes that once looked at me with tenderness and love, now held not the slightest trace of warmth. Behind that gentle and refined bearing lay a distance and indifference that was impossible to describe. I placed a hand over my chest, soothing the waves of pain beating within my heart. I lowered my head and stared at the ground. When I lifted it again, a shining tear slid down my cheek, quickly falling and disappearing. I gave a bitter smile. Your Highness. My parents have always raised me very strictly. When I was little, I once cried in front of others and was punished by copying books for several days. At that time, when you saw I was unhappy, you told me countless jokes just to make me laugh again. As I grew older, I learned to restrain my emotions. Only when I was with you did I not have to hide my joys, anger, sorrow, and happiness. I could laugh and play as freely as I wished. The crown prince stood upright, his eyes devoid of any emotion. All of that belongs to the past. There is no need to bring it up again. The more I wiped my tears, the more they fell, soaking the front of my robe. My voice became choked with emotion. Your Highness. Are you truly not afraid that one day, when you remember everything, you will regret this? He replied calmly, No. I have never regretted it. I covered my face and cried. However long I cried, he stood there waiting just as long. He had always been like this. Whenever he did anything, he was patient and deliberate, never hurried. After crying for a while, I wiped away my tears. Then I took out the scissors I had once intended to use to cut apart the wedding robe I had spent an entire year embroidering. Calming my emotions, I said softly, My apologies for making your Highness laugh at me. In the future, I will try harder to restrain myself. I have known Ronyu for far too long. I am not made of stone or iron. How could I simply let go at once? But with each wave of pain, I can let go a little more. The more it hurts, the clearer my mind becomes. Sooner or later, there will come a day when I can face him calmly. I ordered someone to open the chest and picked up a peace talisman. This is the talisman I obtained for your highness before you left the palace. I climbed several thousand steps to reach the temple and pray for it. The crown prince looked toward me. With a flick of my wrist, I threw it down into the deep ravine. It is no longer needed now. Let it fall down there. Whoever is fortunate enough to pick it up may keep that piece for themselves. A trace of astonishment flashed through the crown prince's eyes. Next, I picked up a handkerchief. This is the handkerchief your highness insisted I use to wipe the sweat from your forehead during the autumn hunt. Afterwards, you hid it and refused to return it to me. I cut away the corner embroidered with the character Jiang. Then I released it. The handkerchief was carried high into the air by the wind before slowly drifting down into the river below. At the very least, it's embroidered with gold thread. If it floats downstream and some villager happens to find it, they could sell it for a little money to buy something good to eat. From the chest I then took out a stack of paper. I looked carefully at the writing on them and suddenly laughed. When I was little and first learning to write, the very first character I learned was you, Jade. It was your highness who taught me. So many years have passed, yet I still kept these papers. I tore them all to pieces. White fragments of paper scattered into the wind and flew away. One by one, the items in the chest, things Bao Zhu had chosen because they could neither be sold nor gifted away, were all thrown down the cliff by my hand. Finally, I picked up a lock of hair. For a moment, I felt a sudden pang of sorrow and loosened my grip slightly. But in the end, I lifted the scissors and cut it off decisively. Perhaps my actions seemed strange, and perhaps because I kept mentioning things from the past. The crown prince watched me with an expression too complicated to describe. I met his gaze directly and spoke seriously. Your Highness, you were the one who said you would never regret it. If one day you do regret it, do not come looking for me. There will be no such possibility. I gave a bitter smile. My fingers relaxed. The strand of dark hair was carried away by the wind and disappeared into the deep waters below. Then I threw the scissors in my hand as well. From afar, I watched as they sank silently into the river without even creating a ripple. Standing on the cliff, I gazed at the endless mountain ranges stretching far into the distance. The river flowed slowly onward, heading toward the vast sea without ever turning back. The crown prince had been watching every movement of mine. Only after I finished did he finally speak indifferently. Miss Jiang, have you finished your performance? I replied calmly, I was not performing. I began walking back toward the carriage. My voice drifted softly into the wind. I will simply consider that the crown prince I once knew never returned. I will consider that he died here and never came back. Such rebellious and disrespectful words, if it had been before, as a daughter of the Jiang family, I would never have spoken them in front of anyone. But now I had just been rejected by the crown prince. Surely he felt guilty toward me. The emperor and the queen likely felt the same. So I believed I could allow myself to be a little willful. Sure enough, when the crown prince heard those words, his expression changed. But from beginning to end, he said nothing. On the way back, he mounted his horse and rode on his own rather than sharing the carriage with me. I did not look at him again. Instead, I thought of Bao Zhu. The girl should have finished her task by now. Sure enough, as soon as we returned to the capital, Bao Zhu skipped over happily to report, Miss. I took the remaining items to the pawn shop and sold them all. We got a whole pile of money. Bao Zhu was always enthusiastic about buying and selling. She was the daughter of a merchant family and had been sent to serve as my maid to help manage my finances. Her mind was always full of thoughts about money. Before going to the Yun River, the items that could be sold had already been loaded onto a carriage and sent to the pawn shop. In such a short time, She had already completed the task. After I praised her a few times, Baoju's eyes curved into happy crescents. I gently rubbed the jade pendant in my hand and said softly, "Go distribute the money to the beggars along the road and the nearby townspeople." But instead of doing as I said, Baoju suddenly produced a gong from somewhere and began banging on it loudly. The ear-piercing clang of the gong, combined with her loud voice, quickly drew the attention of everyone nearby. "Our young lady has encountered a joyous occasion today and is giving away money as charity. Come quickly. Come quickly." I paused, watching as a crowd began rushing toward us. On the other side, the crown prince also looked over. Baoju ordered the servants to distribute coins along the road. As she tossed the coins, she shouted loudly, "Congratulations to our young lady for soon reaching the age of adulthood." The moment the coins scattered, the surrounding people rushed forward to pick them up. At the same time, they shouted blessings. "May the young lady grow more and more beautiful." The nearby townspeople, hearing the commotion, hurried over as well. The crowd grew larger and larger. Soon the carriages of both the crown prince and myself were surrounded in the middle, unable to move. Each time Baoju threw another handful of coins, she came up with another congratulatory phrase. Then she added another line, "Congratulations to our young lady for gaining her freedom. The men of the entire capital are now free for her to choose." That sentence sounded almost accidental, yet it also seemed like a deliberate revelation of my identity. Because they were receiving money, the surrounding people enthusiastically praised the Jiang family's young lady for her generosity and kindness. The same people who earlier had pointed and whispered at the Jiang family's carriage now began saying that whichever family the Jiang family's young lady married into would surely be blessed with great fortune. The imperial family truly let go of a virtuous daughter-in-law. This was not beyond my expectations. However, I had not expected Baoju to be so bold as to say such things openly in front of such a large crowd. My gaze shifted toward the crown prince. His horse had been pushed to the edge of the road by the pressing crowd. His guards struggled to hold back the people surging forward. He had also heard Baoju's words, and his expression did not look very pleasant at all. I let out a soft laugh. "Very well. Let the girl do as she pleases. After all, I would like to be stubborn for once as well." My gaze drifted across the bustling crowd. Suddenly, I caught sight of a familiar figure. Looking more closely, I realized it was Jiang. She stood by the roadside, perhaps unaware of what was happening ahead. Yet when she saw the copper coins rolling across the ground, she bent down to pick them up just like everyone else. When the crowd finally began to thin, the crown prince noticed her as well. He immediately stepped forward, pulling her up to her feet, his expression darkening. "Why are you here?" I stepped down from the carriage as well. When Jiang saw us, a flicker of embarrassment crossed her face. Several coins were still clutched in her hand, and she looked utterly at a loss. I came to look for you." The crown prince told her to throw the coins away. Almost reflexively, Jiang tossed them far off into the distance. I spoke gently, "Miss Chu, there is no need to mind a few scattered coins. I have something far more valuable that I wish to entrust to you." I extended my hand toward her. Resting in my palm was a white jade pendant carved in the shape of a dragon. A faint violet glow shimmered within the milky stone. The craftsmanship was extraordinarily delicate, the dragon lifelike and vivid. This was the token of love between His Highness and me. When Serena Su and Ethan Su had been granted our imperial marriage, he had gone out of his way to find the finest jade craftsman in the land. He even personally searched for a rare piece of smoky jade that carried a faint violet sheen. Then he drew the design himself so the craftsman could carve it according to his wishes. It was a pair of jade pendants, one dragon and one phoenix. When the two were joined together, they would form a single flawless piece, seamless and perfect, without the slightest trace of division. I wore the dragon jade, and he wore the phoenix jade. His phoenix pendant had likely gone unused for a very long time. Now, I handed the dragon jade to Jiang. Yet she hesitated, clearly not daring to accept it. Her eyes flicked toward the crown prince, as if asking for his permission. The crown prince took the jade from my hand and examined it with suspicion for quite a while. Perhaps he no longer remembered this token of love at all. Jiang blinked at the shimmering pendant. "See, can I take a look?" The crown prince casually handed it to her, the other half. "I must have dropped it into the river long ago. Another day, I will send someone to retrieve it and deliver it to the Jiang residence." "There's no need," I replied calmly. "It was something your highness had made in the first place. It would be best for you to keep it yourself." I had just turned to leave when suddenly, the jade pendant in Jiang's hand shattered. It crumbled into pieces right in her palm. She froze in place, completely stunned and unsure of what to do. Fragments of glimmering jade scattered across the ground, producing sharp, brittle sounds as they fell. Jiang burst into tears in panic. I didn't mean to." Beside me, Chloe spoke in a voice dripping with sarcasm. "Of course. Miss Chu merely slipped up for a moment." I helplessly signaled Chloe to be quiet. Perhaps some mechanism inside the jade had been triggered. When Ethan Su first gave the pendant to me, he had boasted proudly that the pair of jade pieces were utterly unique. They had been crafted by the most skilled artisan in the world, and hidden within them were intricate mechanisms of remarkable ingenuity. If anyone other than the intended owner held them, the jade would shatter automatically. At the time, I thought he was joking. I had never imagined someone could truly create such a wondrous piece of jade. But now the pendant no longer belonged to me. Since it was broken, so be it. I did not care. The person who had once given it to me had already forgotten the promise behind it. What use was there in keeping it any longer? My eyes drifted unconsciously toward the crown prince. He was staring intently at the fragments scattered across the ground, as if slightly dazed. He rubbed his temples and sighed softly. "If it's broken, then it's broken." Autumn passed and winter arrived. Snow blanketed everything in white. Without the title of future crown princess weighing upon me, the burden on my shoulders seemed to lighten considerably. For the past few months, I had stayed quietly within the residence. Days like these, peaceful and carefree, had been rare. However, Mother remained convinced that I was heartbroken beyond measure, which was why I kept myself shut away in the mansion all day. She kept urging me to go out and clear my mind. That day, she took out a letter of extraordinarily exquisite appearance. "The noble consort is hosting a flower viewing banquet in the plum blossom grove outside the capital. Huayue, you cannot refuse this one." This invitation was specially delivered by the noble consort herself. I took the plum blossom branch that had been sent along with the letter. A gentle fragrance of plum blossoms lingered faintly among the petals. The noble consort's status was second only to the queen. She had borne a prince who was several years older than the crown prince. That man was the Prince Sheng. Ethan Su had been named crown prince since childhood. Among all the imperial brothers, he was also the only one truly favored by the emperor. For years, the noble consort and the eldest prince had always kept to themselves, living quietly and without ambition. But now the crown prince had suffered an accident and lost his memory. Rumors had spread throughout the capital, whispers that he abandoned the old for the new, that he was heartless and faithless. Under such circumstances, it was inevitable that some people would grow restless, hoping to seize this opportunity to overthrow him. After the broken engagement between the Crown Prince and me, the Jiang family no longer stood on the same side as him. Moreover, father commanded no small number of loyal subordinates. To this day, Prince Sheng had yet to take a principal consort. In the past, I had little contact with the noble consort, yet now she had sent such a formal invitation. 8 or 9 chances out of 10, she intended to match me with Prince Sheng, to draw the power of the Jiang family over to their side. That is the true intention behind this flower viewing banquet. I asked my mother, "What do you and father think about it?" "Huayue," she said gently, "you've stayed inside the residence for far too long. Take this opportunity to go out, breathe some fresh air, and ease your mind." "I understand," I replied quietly. "Father does not wish to form an alliance with Adrian Su." Thinking about it carefully, that made perfect sense. Even if the Crown Prince could not suppress his imperial brothers, the Emperor was still there. To the Emperor, only the Crown Prince was truly his son, all the others were merely subjects. The noble consort was already anxious enough to make a move, yet the Emperor had not revealed his stance. If the Jiang family truly joined hands with the noble consort's faction, and the Emperor later chose to suppress them, our family would inevitably be implicated. At present, the Jiang family did not stand with any prince. This invitation was something I could not refuse. But whether or not I accepted the noble consort's goodwill was another matter entirely. This time, I would go only to admire the scenery. There was no need to concern myself with anything else. I changed into a gown the color of crabapple blossoms, adorned myself with a few pieces of jewelry, and set out for the outskirts of the capital. With Chloe. A tranquil river wound through the forest. The surface of the water had frozen solid, glittering faintly beneath the cold winter air. Along both riverbanks stretched 10 miles of blooming plum blossoms, their beauty so breathtaking it almost seemed unreal. It truly was the perfect place to lift one's spirits. As the young lady of the Jiang family, my status was noble. I did not need to arrive too early, but neither should I appear too late. Arriving just a little before the noble consort herself would be appropriate, I strolled along the riverbank, laughing and chatting with Chloe. Then suddenly, we ran into Chu Ying, who was also wandering nearby. She was standing on tiptoe, stretching her hand up to reach a high branch of plum blossoms. The moment she saw me, she lost her balance and slipped, falling flat onto the ground. Her eyes immediately reddened. "Miss Jiang. It's been a long time." She looked rather pitiful. I was about to step forward to help her up, but she suddenly shrank back in fear, retreating as though I were some savage beast. Afterward, perhaps realizing her reaction was inappropriate, Chu Ying looked at me apologetically. I said nothing. I simply withdrew my hand. For some reason, I could not understand why she feared me so much. It was true that my engagement with the Crown Prince had fallen apart because of her. With the power of the Jiang family, dealing with her would have been as easy as flipping one's hand. But our family had never once made things difficult for Chu Ying. Yet every time she saw me, she trembled with fear, and I had no idea why. I lowered my gaze to look at her. "Miss Chu, it has indeed been a long time." Since that encounter on the roadside, I had not seen her again. "Inger, why are you sitting on the ground?" The Crown Prince approached and helped her to her feet. When he saw the aggrieved expression on the face of the woman he cherished, a look of tenderness appeared in his eyes. He removed his cloak and draped it around Chu Ying's shoulders. Then he noticed me standing beside them. Before I even had the chance to greet him properly, his expression darkened. "Miss Jiang, if you have any grievances, come to me directly. I hope you won't make things difficult for her." Hearing those words, I was utterly speechless. I merely passed by and happened to run into Miss Chu. She slipped and fell on her own. This has nothing to do with me." The Crown Prince looked slightly surprised and turned to Chu Ying. "Inger, is that what happened?" For some unknown reason, Chu Ying suddenly burst into tears. She cried so hard she could barely speak. It was as though I had bullied her and she was too afraid to say it aloud. Someone nearby muttered, "So the young lady of the Jiang family is actually this kind of person." Inger has always been timid and pure-hearted. She has never made enemies with anyone. If Miss Jiang is willing to apologize, I will not pursue this matter any further. Chu Ying remained curled within the cloak, sobbing softly, yet she secretly glanced in my direction. A cold gust of wind swept past. I looked at her carefully, just like the first time I had seen her in the Crown Prince's palace. Back then, her eyes had been clear and innocent. Yet after spending only a short time in the capital, she had already learned quite a few despicable tricks. I had no desire to argue, but neither would I allow anyone to bully me without reason. "This is entirely my fault," I said calmly. "Had I known Miss Chu was so timid, would never have taken a stroll here. I should not have been so careless as to let Miss Chu see me. From now on, whenever Miss Chu is present, I will certainly stay 3 miles away and never appear within her sight." Every word I spoke dripped with sarcasm. Both of them were stunned. Perhaps they had grown too accustomed to seeing me as the refined and gentle young lady of the Jiang family. They had never imagined that my tongue could be so sharp. To be honest, even I had not expected it myself. It seemed that lately I had become increasingly unrestrained. But perhaps that was not such a bad thing. With a faint smile, I added, "To make amends, I will have someone pick that plum blossom branch for Miss Chu." Chloe immediately understood. She ran toward the plum tree and imitated Chu Ying's delicate pose, stretching up to reach the branch. Then suddenly she cried out, slipped, and fell heavily into the snow. I clearly saw her pinch her own leg hard. Her eyes instantly turned red with tears. Looking aggrieved, she turned toward me. "Miss, someone scared this servant and made me slip. Miss, you must stand up for me." I scolded her coldly. "You're so timid, yet you still dare blame others? You're not even as brave as a rabbit. Get up immediately. Do you think His Highness the Crown Prince is blind?" The Crown Prince's expression darkened upon hearing that. Chloe scrambled to her feet while muttering, "This servant wouldn't dare compare herself to a rabbit." The rabbit Miss once raised caused such chaos throughout the Jiang residence. Chloe's words made me burst out laughing. All the frustration that had been building in my chest vanished in an instant. I took the plum blossom branch from Chloe's hand and slowly walked toward Chu Ying, handing it to her. Then I turned to look at Ethan Su. "This servant has already apologized and made compensation. Is Your Highness the Crown Prince satisfied now?" Naturally, he understood the sarcasm hidden in my little performance just now. Yet he still looked at me with clear confusion in his eyes. Just then, someone suddenly walked over from somewhere nearby, clapping his hands lightly as he spoke. "Remarkable, truly remarkable. For 2 young ladies to slip and fall in the very same place. It seems this plum tree is rather unlucky." The man wore a robe of brocade, and his features bore a faint resemblance to the Crown Prince. He was none other than Adrian Su, Prince Sheng. With that single remark, he had indirectly confirmed that Chu Ying's fall had nothing to do with me. Chu Ying's face turned pale. The Crown Prince glanced at her with a puzzled expression, then calmly said to me, "My apologies. I misunderstood Miss Jiang." I smiled faintly in response. "It doesn't matter. Whether Your Highness believes it or not, this matter truly had nothing to do with me. His gaze flickered slightly. Imperial brother, Adrian Su continued with a smile. I originally came to fetch you, but instead I had the good fortune of witnessing such an entertaining scene. Since everything has been settled, we should hurry along. A banquet is waiting ahead. After speaking, he turned and greeted me politely. Miss Jiang, it is rare to meet such a beauty. Even the 10 miles of plum blossoms pale in comparison. I merely smiled without responding. To dare stand before the crown prince and praise his former fiancée like that. It was simply foolish beyond words. Just as I was about to leave, I turned my head slightly and looked at Jiang. If I remember correctly, the cloak Miss Chu is wearing was a birthday gift I once gave to the crown prince. In the corner of the cloak, there is an embroidered character, Jiang. Any item I sent to the Eastern Palace usually had a small ginger flower embroidered on it. The character Jiang originally meant ginger, serving as my personal mark. That time, Ethan Su had annoyed me so badly that I remained angry for several days. So instead of embroidering the ginger flower, I deliberately stitched the character Jiang in crooked, messy strokes out of spite. The servants of the Eastern Palace likely didn't know about this, so the cloak had never been returned to me. Jiang stood frozen in place, looking flustered, unsure whether she should continue wearing it or take it off and return it to me. The crown prince probably didn't know the cloak had come from me either. After a moment of silence, he said, 10,000 taels. Consider it that I've bought this cloak. What does Miss Jiang think? I held the hand warmer in my palms, the warmth spreading gently through my fingers. I'm not so lacking that I would care about a single cloak. Nor am I short of 10,000 taels. As for things that others have already used, I have no need for them. Let it simply be a gift to Miss Chu. The crown prince's expression tightened slightly, though he still responded politely. Then I must thank Miss Jiang. I turned and walked away without another glance at them. 10 miles of red plum blossoms bloomed vividly against the white snow. The palace attendants had erected a stage at the place where the plum blossoms flourished most magnificently. On the stage, singing girls were already performing opera. By the time I arrived, most of the guests were already present. Seeing Adrian Su, the crown prince, and me enter together, the curious gazes of everyone present immediately gathered in our direction. I ignored their stares. Instead, I greeted a few young ladies I knew and soon joined their conversation, chatting and laughing with ease. Song Shuang was the legitimate daughter of the general's residence. In terms of talent, beauty, and family background, she likely ranked just below me. She was also the young lady whom countless noble families in the capital wished to marry into their households. During our conversation, she suddenly asked me, this time, the noble consort has specially brought out a vermilion plum tree. Perhaps she intends for those present today to display a bit of talent and treat it as an auspicious occasion. Miss Jiang, are you interested in it? Whoever won the vermilion plum at this flower banquet would undoubtedly gain widespread fame. More importantly, it would prove that the person met the noble consort's standards for selecting a daughter-in-law. The implication behind Song Shuang's question was clear. Was I interested in becoming the principal consort of Adrian Su, Prince Sheng? I answered slowly, a treasure as rare as the vermilion plum is indeed valuable. But my family lacks no precious things. This plum tree would be better given to someone who truly needs it. My meaning could not have been clearer. I had no interest. Song Shuang smiled. What a coincidence. I feel exactly the same. I looked at her, and suddenly we both burst into laughter. Not long afterward, the noble consort arrived. She called me over to sit beside her and spoke affectionately. It has been a long time since we last met. Huayue. You grow more beautiful every time I see you. I smiled softly. this servant is not even half as radiant as your ladyship." The noble consort touched the bracelet on her wrist, perhaps intending to remove it and give it to me. Just then, a cold gust of wind swept past. I raised my hand to adjust my hair. In doing so, the jade bracelet on my wrist was revealed, an extremely precious piece that had once been personally bestowed upon me by the emperor himself. In this world, there was likely no second bracelet like it. When the noble consort saw the jade bracelet on my wrist, she quietly withdrew her hand. After adjusting my hair, I naturally tucked my hand back into my sleeve. My preparations before leaving the residence had not been in vain. Before coming here, I had deliberately brought this bracelet with me. And not only that, every piece of jewelry I wore today had been bestowed by the emperor himself. They were precious, yet understated, elegant enough to convey my meaning, but not ostentatious enough to overshadow the noble consort. Seeing the items on me, the noble consort could no longer find an opportunity to gift me anything else. Her mood clearly worsened, and she spoke much less afterward. When the banquet finally began, I cheerfully returned to my seat beside Song Shuang. The stage was lively with singing and dancing, while the two of us sat quietly below, secretly competing over the pastries. Our tastes were astonishingly similar. Sure enough, after some time, the noble consort announced a competition for the young ladies attending today's flower viewing banquet. The grand prize was the precious vermilion plum tree. She even specially invited Song Shuang to perform. First, Song Shuang played the piece she was most confident in, and everyone present praised her without end. Yet I could tell she had not displayed even half of her true ability. And it wasn't just her. Every young lady who performed afterwards seemed to be deliberately holding back. They were all girls who had no interest in becoming Prince Xing's consort. They had merely come to participate out of respect for the noble consort. Of course, there were also those who wished to display their full talents in hopes of catching the noble consort's attention. Meanwhile, I sat there enjoying the performances while quietly pushing the dishes I disliked towards Song Shuang, and placing the foods she disliked onto her plate in return. Just as I was secretly playing tricks on her, I suddenly saw Chuing appear on the stage. What was she planning to do now? I glanced toward the men's seating area. The crown prince was not there. I turned to Chloe. She had been carefully observing the movements of everyone present. Leaning close, she whispered softly, "The crown prince just left with a high-ranking minister." I was not surprised. Without the Jiang family support and having lost his memories, the crown prince had indeed been extremely busy lately. Everything had to be handled personally. Someone like Chuing needed to be watched every moment. See, the moment no one kept an eye on her, she went off and did something foolish again. This flower banquet had been organized by the noble consort to select a daughter-in-law. Yet Chuing, already a woman of the Eastern Palace, still dared to join the entertainment. Song Shuang frowned as she watched, then turned to me with a puzzled expression. She probably thought that everyone needed to go on stage as well. In truth, it wasn't such a big matter. Participating briefly just to show courtesy would be fine, as long as one didn't attract too much attention. Just as that thought crossed my mind, Chuing plucked a bamboo leaf and shyly said she had no special talents. "All I can do is play a simple tune using this bamboo leaf." The moment she finished speaking, the crowd around us immediately became excited. After sitting through so many performances of zither and singing, everyone had already grown bored. At last, someone different had appeared to spark their interest. Chuing raised the leaf to her lips. A gentle folk melody flowed from it. The tune was fresh and lively, like a spring breeze sweeping through the plum forest, melting the snow. It felt as though swallows and orioles were singing joyfully in response. When the music ended, thunderous applause erupted. People around us praised her endlessly. I glanced sideways and noticed the interest flickering in Adrian Su's eyes as he watched Chuing. The noble consort forced a smile. because it was obvious that Chu Ying's performance had completely surpassed Song Shuang's. If no one afterward could outshine her, then Chu Ying would become the winner of today's competition, and the vermilion plum tree the noble consort had prepared would have been wasted. The noble consort turned to me. I've heard that the young lady of the Jiang family has been skilled in music since childhood, with extraordinary talent. I wonder whether Miss Jiang has brought her zither today so everyone here may enjoy it. Of course I hadn't brought one. Otherwise, how could I use that as an excuse to refuse performing? Originally, I had planned for Song Shuang to win this round so she could deal with the noble consort herself. That was why I deliberately hadn't brought my zither, but the current situation had clearly gone beyond my expectations. If I refused the noble consort now, wouldn't the entire capital laugh at the noble ladies of the city, saying none of them could surpass a mere common girl? I stood up, reporting to your ladyship, my zither is currently being repaired. However, I noticed the opera troupe brought a harp with them today. I could try playing that. Just now, Song Shuang had played the guqin. I didn't want to perform the same instrument. If I played it well, Song Shuang would lose face. If I played poorly, then I would be the one embarrassed. Since none of the previous performers had touched the harp, it was the best choice. The harp was brought onto the stage. I slowly plucked a few notes to test it. Perhaps the opera troupe had brought it along for one of their performances. The instrument was of decent quality, good enough to use. Children of noble families usually preferred the flute, since it was considered elegant and refined. Very few people learned the harp. Many believed it was an instrument used by courtesans and musicians, and that playing it would lower one's status. But I liked the harp much more. That time, after Ethan Seuss saw the crooked Jiang character embroidered on his cloak, he immediately knew I was sulking. So he took me out strolling through the streets. By chance, I saw a harp that caught my eye. It was so beautiful that I spent a long time afterward learning how to play it. However, that harp had already been sold several months ago. After I had grown accustomed to the new harp in my hands, I began my piece. Gradually, the people seated all around fell silent, drawn into the wondrous scene woven by the music. Moonlight shining upon a mountain peak, the faint fragrance of plum blossoms lingering in the air. When the final note faded, the surroundings remained utterly still. Not a single sound could be heard. I was not particularly surprised. I simply bowed to the noble consort, then returned calmly to my seat. Only then did everyone seem to awaken from a dream. Praises immediately erupted from every direction. The noble consort declared that my performance surely ranked first in today's competition, and so the vermilion plum tree was awarded to me. However, she did not have anyone bring the entire tree to my seat. Instead, she reached out, plucked a single branch, and handed it to me. According to tradition, she said, Miss Jiang may gift this plum blossom branch to anyone present here. I wonder whom Miss Jiang intends to give it to. I accepted the branch. The vermilion plum petals were delicate and layered, breathtakingly beautiful. To whom should I give it? I looked toward the noble consort. Her eyes were filled with expectation. She was clearly waiting for me to present the flower to Adrian Su. Prince Sheng was also watching me, his gaze confident, as if victory were already in his grasp. Chu Ying stared at the branch in my hand, admiration flickering in her eyes. Chloe looked at the branch as well, but her gaze was full of regret. She was probably thinking that if the branch hadn't been plucked, the plum tree itself would have been worth quite a fortune. Meanwhile, Song Shuang was chewing the last pastry I had just stolen from her plate. When she noticed me looking over, she even winked at me. Everyone present was waiting for my next move. Over in the corner, the crown prince had returned at some unknown moment. A few snowflakes still clung to his dark hair. He was staring at the harp, rubbing his temples. perhaps suffering from another headache. Then he lifted his head and looked in this direction. Our eyes met at the same time. When I saw that, I shifted my gaze away and smiled faintly. A beautiful flower should naturally belong to a beauty. In my eyes, the most beautiful woman in the world is, of course, my mother. Unfortunately, she is not here today. So please allow me, as her daughter, to accept this branch on her behalf. Holding the plum blossom branch, I gently tucked it into my hair. I looked around. Everywhere I turned, people stared in shock. Everyone, except the crown prince. His slender fingers continued pressing against his temples. Confusion and panic filled his eyes. Even when Chewing called out to him, he did not seem to hear her. From that day onward, my reputation spread even further. Suitors began arriving at the Jiang residence in endless streams. My mother selected several men who possessed both talent and good looks. She invited a painter to create their portraits and placed the stack of paintings before me. "Huayue, your coming-of-age ceremony is approaching," she said. "It is time to begin thinking about marriage. These are all men your father and I have chosen. Take a look and see if any of them please you." But I had no interest in those portraits. What difference was there between them? No matter whom I married, I would still have to leave my home. For the rest of my life, I would be confined within some noble residence, endlessly dealing with the headaches of wives and concubines. I buried my head in my mother's arms. It seemed I had not acted spoiled with her like this for a very long time. My voice sounded unhappy. "Mother, Huayue wants to stay by your side and father's for the rest of my life." My mother simply treated it as a childish joke. Seeing that I showed no interest, she did not force the matter. Instead, she ordered the servants to put the portraits away. "We can discuss it again after your coming-of-age ceremony. There is no hurry." I understood my parents' concerns, as the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family. Countless people were watching my marriage prospects. Even the emperor and the noble consort had already inquired about it several times. This was not a decision I could make alone. Not long after my mother left, a servant came to inform me that someone wished to see me. It was Li He, whom I had not seen for quite some time. He looked much thinner now, no longer the strong and sturdy man he once was. "Miss Jiang," he said respectfully, "this humble servant has taken the liberty of coming to see you. I hope Miss Jiang will not inform the crown prince." I accepted the box he handed me and passed it to Chloe. The crown prince ordered this cloak to be disposed of after returning from the flower banquet. This servant remembered it belonged to Miss Jiang, so I brought it here. Chloe shot him a glare. "Winter has arrived, and it just so happens that the charcoal has run out." Understanding immediately, Chloe tossed the cloak into the brazier filled with charcoal. The flames burst to life instantly. Before Li He could even react, the cloak had already caught fire. Chloe even enthusiastically invited him to come closer and experience the warmth of a 10,000-tail fire. Li He hurriedly waved his hands in refusal, speaking so nervously he nearly bit his own tongue. "Miss Jiang, wait, well, never mind. It's already burning anyway." He glanced around carefully before lowering his voice. "Miss Jiang, the crown prince has not been well lately. His headaches are growing more severe. A few nights ago, His Highness suddenly woke in the middle of the night and summoned all of us servants. Then he asked whether he had once given Miss Jiang a harp. This is something this humble servant never told His Highness," Li He continued. "It was His Highness who remembered it on his own. But he only recalled scattered fragments of memory. He has forbidden us servants from speaking about it." Li He blinked and looked at me. "Miss Jiang, The old imperial physician will soon arrive in the capital. If His Highness can recover all of his memories. Could you give him another chance? Would that be possible? Chloe widened her eyes and stared at me. I walked over to the brazier and looked at the burning cloak. If this cloak could return to how it was before, I said calmly, then the Crown Prince and I would naturally be able to continue our former relationship. He did not know what else he could say. Disheartened, he quietly took his leave. Time passed. The snow gradually began to melt, and the spring breeze finally arrived in the capital. Invitations for my coming-of-age ceremony had been delivered to every noble residence. My grandfather sighed regretfully. That old imperial physician watched me grow up. I wonder whether he will arrive in time for your coming-of-age ceremony. Originally, according to the schedule, he should have arrived in time, but unfortunately, the old physician had terrible luck. On the road to the capital, he encountered mountain bandits. By the time news reached the capital, he had already disappeared without a trace. The emperor immediately sent troops to eliminate the bandits, while also searching for the missing physician. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.